Hey everyone, TGIF, happy Friday. Today with Dave Michaels, the one and only of Talking Points and Talking Heads fame. Dave, how are you?
TGI Evan. Yeah, it's great to be
TGIF.
here. I'm doing well.
Good. Well, we're going to dive into enterprise communications, a retrospective on not just December of last year, your monthly insider report, but the whole year. We're going to get a recap of the whole year.
The
That's going to
whole
be
year, in case you
And
missed it.
as always, I'm gonna share my screen here because there's a document, an email newsletter that I look forward to every month, and it's called what? The Talking Heads Insider
Talking
Report,
points,
Talking Points Insider Report. And
talking
I'm just happy to be an
heads is
insider.
is our.
I'm really excited to be one of what you call the insider. Is that just pay for play? If you pay the subscription, you're an insider, or
No, there's no advertising in this. There's no. It's a
okay?
subscription newsletter, but it is not pay for play at all whatsoever.
Okay,
Um,
so that's good to know. But it does cost. It's not free. In other words, all my content is free. You actually make a living from this stuff, so there's a nominal charge. But let's dive in. It starts with good riddance to 2022. Ever glass
yeah,
half empty, Dave. But you say that every year.
I
So
do
what?
say that every year. I even commented on that. It's been the last several years that I've been really excited about the end of the year and finally coming to an end. 2022 was the worst, and I'm not going to go into that. It's in the newsletter. It's about I dealt with the Marshall fire at the beginning of the
Mhm.
year, and actually all year we ended up moving. Who needs it? So let's just skip that whole part. Let's get to the story of the month.
All
How's
right,
that?
story of the month. And was this story written by something called Chat GPT or not?
Well, no, that was the Christmas card of the month from you. And no, but it's the same. It's the same story. And actually, the story of the month of December 2022, which is ChatGPT, is probably sneak preview the story of the year of 2023. So,
Wow.
but certainly was the story of the month. I don't think it was the story of the month of 2022, a story of the year of 22. We'll get to that in a moment. But I think that the ChatGPT was certainly the story of December, and I think it's pretty significant. And you're a great example. You've really been using ChatGPT very heavily for a lot of your.
Well, I may or may not have, I won't say for sure, have co authored about 12 blogs with ChatGPT. And I have no
And how
idea
many
what
Christmas
that,
cards?
at least a dozen Christmas card rhymes that would have taken me at least 3 to 4 weeks each to come up with. But besides being obviously kind of written by ChatGPT, because unlike you, I can't write, what do we learn from all this? What's your takeaway?
Well, I think there's a couple of really important things about ChatGPT to take away from its success. Um, one of the big ones is that it was an incremental update, and so ChatGPT has been around for a while, and they keep on getting it better and better. But in December, we saw version 3, and it was a fairly in many ways a fairly minor incremental update, but it was the big one. And I think that's an important takeaway because sometimes it is just an incremental update that makes a product go from good to great. And I think that ChatGPT, came into the mainstream, bust its way into the mainstream. And what I identified here was 4 reasons why I think it was so significant. The first one is the one you've been talking about, is that it can actually write. And a lot of AI stuff can't write very well. It's very good at predicting things. It's very good at understanding sometimes what you're asking sometimes, but it doesn't really write. And um, everybody needs to write. And so all of a sudden we have an AI that is useful for everybody. Not everybody needs to predict, and so it kind of makes AI much more usable. Number two is it's collaborative. And as you've been doing with your articles, is that you've been coaching it and you've been explaining to it, this is what I want to talk about. It gives you a first pass, and you say, well, I need a little more on this, and you work with it. And so,
Yeah, I had it actually write 10 questions for a podcast, and I had it do it in the style of a Gartner analyst. which I'm not sure if that's good or bad. But are you worried? Are you worried that schlubs like me can now be Gartner analysts in their writing and commentary?
Well, I've been worried about you for quite some time, Evan, for different reasons. But uh, you know, I wouldn't say I'm worried. I think that the AI technology is, we've been knowing it's coming for a long time, and it's always been, 5, 10 years away. I think what happened with Chat GPT is it turned into like it's really like maybe a couple years away at this point.
Well, the
So,
fastest growing, I guess, quote unquote, application or service ever. When you look at Instagram and apps, and
yep.
it reached 1 million users in like a few days, which
Well,
is
that's point
extraordinary.
three about
Okay.
about accessibility. But I want to finish on point two here is that it's collaborative. And I happen to be, I mean, I know this might surprise you, but I happen to be a collaboration professional. And and so I write about collaboration all the time. And the point is that the definition of collaboration hasn't changed for a long time. It's two or more people working toward a common goal. The problem with that definition is the word people. All of a sudden, we're going to be collaborating with AI. And a lot of people need to write, a lot of people need to code, a lot of people need to do things like this. And suddenly, we need to look at collaboration, not between just people, but between entities, or if you want to call it machines or whatever. And I think that this is really changes the game. It changes the kind of skills that organizations will be looking for in their people, because it's less about what you know and more about how you can get it out of the AI. But this is all going to happen slowly. It's all going to change. It's starting to change. But my point is that it's for the first time we have a collaborative partner in AI. Then the third thing I just mentioned, accessibility. You get to that kind of growth you were talking about, millions of users in less than a week. That's not because it's esoteric or hard to use. It's because of the opposite. It's very simple and easy to use. Even you can use it, Evan. And so ChatGPT really broke that. And then the fourth thing that I think is really important here is that this type of AI um, is a very different approach. And Evan, in our podcast, Talking Heads, we've talked to a lot of AI companies. I think there's something like 2,000 conversational AI companies right now in the contact center space, for example. There's a lot of companies, and what they've been doing is they try to compete by specialization. They're building a moat around certain industries, certain tools, etc. What ChatGPT is doing is it's a large language model, and that's a different barrier to entry, a big barrier to entry. Not very many firms can do this, and so we're going to see a big shakeup in the AI space. It's going to go from thousands of vendors to a smaller number. I think it's going to be a big shakeup.
Well, I like Jacobs because they present opportunities as well as challenges. But ChatGPT is not even a product yet. It's not a service. There's no API. It's not in production. I think they call it a demo or something.
Yeah.
So, what's next?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And of course, there's no idea. But the thing that to keep in mind here is that most AI, because it's so esoteric and so complex and so expensive, that the applications are created by people in lab coats in labs, and they figure out what would AI be good for. It'd be good for predicting the weather. It'll be good for doing this, be good for doing that. Suddenly, we've got soccer moms figuring out the way to do the soccer schedule with AI. And so by making this thing so accessible and making it free, which of course it won't stay free for much longer, but by making it free, we're seeing innovation from people that aren't in lab coats. And I think it's going to really change the potential use cases of AI. I think Google's trying to figure out how to catch up to this. That Google has been hinting that they've been there all along and they just kept theirs closed. I think there's a little more of a panic at Google right now. I don't know if that's true. But certainly Microsoft and OpenAI have caused some disruption by making this tool available and showing the world what it can do. There's actually some interesting content. There was just some stuff in the information about this that Microsoft might see an opportunity to use ChatGPT with Bing to unseat Google from its search monopoly. And it's an interesting idea because how do you unseat Google from search? They own that market, but maybe something like Bing and Chat GPT can do that. It's not clear how, but Microsoft's invested $1 billion in Chat GPT. They're looking for a return, and taking out Google would certainly be a decent return. So we'll see where that one goes.
Well, speaking of Google, wasn't Google supposed to be the AI king? Where is their version of Chat GPT for the masses? And
Well, they
is that
have
something?
one. They say they have one, but they say that they believe responsible AI means controlling it and limiting it, and they have the keys. And so there's some discussion about whether OpenAI and Microsoft are being responsible by letting this thing be so open and accessible. There should be some. Microsoft had a terrible experience before making their AI. What was it? The chatbot? I forget the name of it. Where it went fascist on us. But there's risk to putting this stuff out in the open, and ChatGPT has so far been very successful with it. ChatGPT is backed by Microsoft, and they see it now as a disruptive opportunity. Google sees it as a dangerous thing to be doing, and so it's easier for Google to say that when they have all the AI and they don't, nobody else does. But that's the problem. You really can't control this stuff, and so Google thought they can control it by keeping it in the lab. Microsoft says, nope, we're going to put it out there. So what comes next? Who knows?
Well, what comes next might be something I'm writing about at the moment with ChatGPT, and that is a blog about Ray Kurzweil, the AI innovator, and his vision of the singularity, when mind and machine become one. He had this vision. I think it's 2045 or 2050 when we'll essentially become one and live forever in the sort of metaverse of sorts. And I think we're back on track to that prediction. Maybe based on what I'm seeing, it's still 25 years away, but I'm excited to to continue on this journey. So getting back to back out of the ether here to more practical news. What else happened in December and last year that is referenced in the talking
So
points?
this part of the newsletter, I did a year of comms, and I picked 8 of the top, what I consider the top stories of the year of comms. Some of them are broad, some of them are narrow, but the first one there was the Russia-Ukraine war. And it was kind of a calm story, not necessarily, but kind of a calm story. I think the main point of this story is that it was a much bigger impact than I think many of us had expected. I mean, there was a build up to this war for quite some time, and we're like, oh, hope it doesn't happen, but big deal if it does, because it doesn't affect me. But I think that the war affected a lot of Europe and therefore a lot of America. We've seen it affect pricing. We've seen it affect energy discussions. We've seen it affect software development. A lot of comms companies like Ring Central and Five9 have been very actively moving the development out of that area. A lot of companies like Avaya had to shut down their Russia operations. So there's a whole bunch of stories to tell here in this Russia-Ukraine war. The problem with this war, and I know you've been watching it closely, the problem with this war is there's no end in sight. I mean, you've got the Ukraine, which has basically unlimited weapons, and you've got Russia, which basically has unlimited weapons. And I don't know how anybody is going to see this thing end, but so it might be going on for a while. But
Yeah, I think it's the other side of that discussion is Starlink. I mean, what a story for the internet. And half of the combat videos that you see out there are being discussed on Google Meet in the field over Starlink. Talking about tactical decisions in the field. It's really crazy to see this unfold in real time and scary as well. Hey, Alan Lepovsky, one of our favorites, is watching. We're going to talk to him about his new startup soon. Okay,
yeah.
what's next? Number 2. What's next on your top
Number
list for?
2, and again, this is a year of comms, so it was the big shift to hybrid work. All of the Ucas companies were quick to embrace the word hybrid as a new way of selling the stuff they were selling before. We saw some pretty significant changes in some vendors. We saw, Hewlett Packard acquire Poly. That's an interesting story because if you recall, what was it, 8 years ago, Polycom acquired, HP got out of video conferencing. They wanted nothing to do with it because it was too much of a narrow slice, too specialized. So they sold it off to Polycom. Polycom became Poly, and HP now acquired it because now it's part of the mainstream. Now everybody wants to be in video conferencing. So I think that's one story. I think Cisco is a really interesting story because they were only did rooms before when it came to equipment. Now they've launched a whole line of desktop solutions, from cameras to monitors to the monitor could be a whiteboard, new phones that can be used for hot desking and scheduling. So we've seen a very different portfolio emerge from a lot of these companies around hybrid work, and I think that's really very important, a big shift for the industry. Um, I, I I don't believe, and you've heard me talk about this before, that hybrid is the long-term strategy. I think fully distributed is a long-term strategy, but transitions take a while. That's what hybrid is all about. Same thing with cars. Hybrid cars are, that EVs don't have the range yet, don't have all the benefits of a gas car, and so we have to have hybrid cars for a while. Some people will go right to EVs, some people won't, but transitions are about hybrid models, and the hybrid office model is going to be with us probably for at least a decade. But I believe the long-term play is much more distributed.
Got it. So remote work and hybrid, and remote work isn't dead. I'm seeing all these article headlines, more clickbait. Remote work is dead because
That's what they
one
want. That's what they
company's
want you to believe, because they want you back in the office. But
yeah.
here's the secret: the top talent sets the rules, and
Mm,
top talent says we're not going back in the office. And if
hmm
you don't like it, fire us. Whoa, 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 whoa! Let's talk about that. And so top talent right now wants flexibility. A lot of people want flexibility, but again, hybrid is a necessary transition, and there's so many issues from a good one actually is payroll tax. Right now, we tax people about where they work, not about where they're employed. And this is a complicated issue. You can't just change this overnight. And so, as we move people to different cities and different states and different countries, payroll tax becomes very complicated. There's going to be some lag factors here that we have to adjust for. But there's another reason why we're going to move more toward distributed models, and that's because of the environmental impact of
mm,
commuting. And a big theme of 2022 was extreme weather, and that doesn't seem to be likely to be less in 23. So as we get more and more aware of the way the weather is impacting our world, our food supply, our environment, we're going to have to get more active in how we manage that, and that might mean less commuting.
And there will be winners and losers here. One of the losers is clearly the downtowns, the inner cities of many major cities who are being devastated by the hollowing out of the workforce and the filter down of the trickle down of the money and economics there.
Yeah,
I guess we're
but
just going
again,
to
it's
have
a
to
double-edged
relearn.
sword. There's certainly a lot of change there, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there's certainly a lot of change, and they need that tax revenue, and they need those commuters to buy hot dogs and everything. But bottom line is, living in a highly dense environment is actually one of the most efficient ways of living.
Mm,
So it's just a different way. I have to adapt. We don't necessarily want to live in the city because we work in the city. We want to possibly live in the city because everything is right at our fingertips, which is
mm,
you know not too
got it.
far from where we were, but a different.
As two people who live in the suburbs talking to each other. But okay, what's next as we go down the list of top highlights, trends,
Well, the big stories again.
stories?
This is big stories of comms, and so I think one of number three here was the Google UJet story, and there's two pieces to this story that I think are really interesting. One is that Google's getting into CCAS,
Hmm
and so to me, all of the big three are all getting into CCAS. Amazon is by far way ahead with Amazon Connect, but Microsoft launched Digital Contact Center this in 22, and Google, I'm going to say, acquired UJet, which is the other element of this story, is they didn't acquire UJet. They
hmm
they um, they made a partnership with UJet, and I think we're going to see, particularly in this current economy, lots of companies making acquisitions without actually acquiring or writing
mm,
checks. I think this would be great for Avaya, for example. Avaya needs a CCAS partner. They don't have the money to buy a CCAS company, but they have a huge base, just like Google has a huge base. And so they can actually make some sort of deal if they wanted to. without possibly writing a check. So I think creative financing is the other element of that story. But the hypervisors are definitely coming for CCAS, and so now we have all three making motions there, and Amazon by far being ahead.
Amazon ahead. Not what else is new there. Okay, next on the list is something you're calling Ucas Mobility 3.0. For those of us who missed 1.0 and 2.0, maybe set some guidance
Yeah,
on
so the problem
what
with
is
that, so
3.0.
UCAS and mobility have always gone hand in hand. From the very first demos of the IPPBX, the idea of being able to make and receive calls on your cell phone have always been really important. Make and receive business calls on your business phone system on your cell phone. And so they've always gone hand in hand. And, we could talk about all the different versions of 2G and 3G. We could talk about 5G and LTE and all this stuff. And so the way I simplified it is I said there's three basic generations of mobility and of UCAS mobility. The first generation, things like Ram Central, was basically creative call forwarding. Simultaneous ring was a popular feature. The ability that my desk phone can ring my cell phone at the same time. I can pick it up at any place. That was 1.0. And there was a little more complicated to make outbound calls, but some companies made some really clever solutions where you dialed in and then it made the outbound call and changed your caller ID, things like that. And there were some very clever approaches to 1.0. 2.0 is the one that's really popular today, which is what I call over-the-top apps. And here you install on your smartphone a over-the-top app for your UCAS environment. You have to open the app. You can make and receive calls from it. Changes your caller ID. You can do messaging. Usually, you can do the access the directory. It's a pretty good experience in general, particularly for people that work at home. It is not that great of an experience for the true mobile user like yourself, Evan, who does everything on their cell phone, and it doesn't work well in the car. There's a lot of issues with over-the-top apps that just don't work very well. It's one of the best kept secrets in the industry that over-the-top apps just don't work very well. Often the ring is too late. You can't answer it because it rang three times on your desk and only one time on your cell phone. The voice quality is no good because it's over the top or it's garbled. A lot of people just say, look, just call my native cell number. It's easier. It'll be better. And they just
Text
give
me.
up
Yeah.
on the whole
Yeah.
fraud. And so that's UCAS 2.0. UCAS Mobility 3.0 is this convergence we're starting to see happen where the cellular companies and the UCAS companies are getting together in the back end, and they are allowing a native experience on the smartphone with a UCAS telephone number. So here there's no app. You don't need an app. You don't need to have anything but a SIM card, basically, or even an eSIM. And the phone is part of the UCAS extension. So now you have a solution that ranges from soft phones to hard phones to smartphones. One solution for the enterprise, potentially globally for all wireless and all wired communications. So that's UCAS Mobility 3. There were 3 keynotes last March at Enterprise Connect that had UCAS Mobility 3 solutions. All 3 of those are GA now, and I believe 2023 is going to be a big year for UCAS Mobility 3.
A great story for the whole ecosystem, from the device makers to the solution providers to the app developers to the end users. They're finally getting some real differentiation there. Next on the list of top things for last year is what we're doing now. Video is now mainstream accepted. But why is this a story? We seem to have been living this the last 3
Well,
years now.
it's a story, but it goes back to that HP Poly thing. It's changed the game a little bit in the industry in the sense that people are no longer necessarily just trying to sell video. When things go mainstream, it's what everybody wants to happen. If you're in part of that technology, a good example is email. Back in the early 2000s or even the late 1990s, there were like 30 email companies that were all waiting for email to go mainstream. They knew it was going to come, but unfortunately, when email actually went mainstream, it boiled down to 2 vendors basically, and almost all of those guys went away. So we're going to see that happen in video. So we have already seen a lot of video companies disappear. We saw Starleaf disappear this last year. We saw Video disappear. We've seen a lot of companies disappear. And now now Google and Microsoft have really become very good at video. They used to be pretty bad at video. which means companies like Pexa, for example, which was really good at interop. Interop is now becoming a standard feature. Microsoft and Google and Cisco, they all support interop, and Zoom has some interop. So Pexip is having to readapt a little bit to embedded video is a good example. But my point is that you can't just sell video anymore because it's mainstream and it's free and everybody has access to it. And so the industry is really changing now. Where a new point with video. There's a new point around expectations from the enterprise. There's a new point with customers when they call in. I'm calling a support line, and I'm wondering why I can't just show them my problem. Why can't I just turn on my camera? And it's becoming frustrating. And so there's an expectation difference. And so we're seeing that this is a fairly significant. Video is now becoming expected.
I love that, and so that's one I'm excited about. The next one I'm not so excited about, in that every week of last year, including this hasn't changed in the new year, there's an extreme weather event somewhere around the U.S., including now there's just epic storms and flooding and maelstrom hitting San Francisco. It's quite scary. You're a climate refugee, and I say that with sadness. I'm not making fun this time. Um, so where do we go from here? Is this we just have to adapt to this new normal of
Well, it's
extreme
interesting
weather?
because for years and years, it's been what's causing the weather is being was more debated. There seems to be less debate about what's causing climate change, but the reality is climate is changing. And I saw this thing around Thanksgiving on the news. On the guy, an expert, was on TV explaining why Thanksgiving prices were higher this year. He said it basically boils down to two things. He said supply chain issues and climate change, and he was trying to say, "Don't worry, this isn't permanent. Prices will go down next year." Well, at best, one of those things, supply chain, might be better next year, but maybe not. The food supply impacts are going to be some more significant.
Mm,
We're seeing that. We're seeing health issues. We're going to see a lot more climate refugees. And from a communications perspective, what this means is there's actually a bit of an opportunity to be part of the solution with distributed workforces, like I mentioned earlier, less commuting. But there's also going to be a lot more planning around weather events. And so as a business continuity. So we talk about the whole return to the office, maybe not such a good idea to centralize everybody. Maybe we
mm,
want distributed as a strategy. We're going to have to rethink about how we do business continuity. If you recall those heat waves in London
mm,
last year, they had to shut down cloud data centers because they didn't have the
crazy.
cooling in the UK for the heat wave that got up in the 80s or something. And uh, so we're going to have to start rethinking as an industry how we provide communications uh, for a global world that is in distress with a lot more climate issues.
Well, thanks for the uplifting thoughts for Friday. But the next big story gave me quite a bit of Schadenfreude, one of my
Yeah.
favorite words. Facebook's crash and burn, Meta's crash and burn. But what's the takeaway for enterprise communications?
Um, I just realized there's a typo in there. But the Facebook thing is just, we don't need to spend a lot of time on Facebook, but the point is that if you were worried about Facebook before last year as either a competitor or as a political person because of the election influence or whatever, you didn't have to worry about it anymore because Mark has done more damage to the Facebook brand and power than any competitor or any regulator possibly could have. And so Facebook is in its own redefinition into Meta, and it's going to take a while. The main thing I wanted to highlight there is how much money he spent on it.
Mm.
I think it was 36 billion is what he spent on the metaverse
And
so
none on
far.
me. How dare he? All I need was 1% of that. It's just
All you need is
ridiculous.
1%. Just to put that in context, now you have to adjust for inflation, I guess. But we Android cost about 200 million, and I think it was the iPhone cost around. I have it in here. Um, the iPhone and Android cost about 200 million. So again, you have to adjust for inflation, but 200 million to 36 billion. I don't think that's inflation. So he's just spending an extraordinary amount of money, and he's damaged the brand. So we'll skip that one.
Well, and
I think
I
the
would
story
just
of the
add though too.
year.
It's more than the brand. There was a fascinating story about Oculus VR headsets sales down 22 to 25%. Like
Yeah, and
that
that's my
was like a
Tesla here. They have
shocker
Google's instead of
after the
goggles, but the
so much for the metaverse. Yeah.
but the point is, the metaverse is never going to take off until goggles are
Hmm.
cheap. And they're not going to be cheap until we get quantities way up and we get the technology way cheaper. And we're still talking 10 years away until goggles are
Hmm.
going to be cheap. And so metaverse is a ways out. The last story here that what I could identify as the biggest comm story of the year, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate this or even agree with me, but surprise, is the Microsoft Cisco announcement that they announced. The meeting,
I have no idea what that was. How did I miss this? So I must
yeah,
have missed this.
you missed it because it didn't get a lot of attention. To be honest, it was basically Microsoft said this is will now support in its meeting Microsoft Teams rooms, MTR, that it would support the Cisco video room equipment. And so a lot of people saw that as, hey, well, Microsoft's been adding other brands. They would start with Poly. They added Logi. They added Neat. They added more brands, but so it's just one more brand. So they saw that as an incremental minor story. And Cisco's been adding various forms of interop for a while, and so they just saw this as an incremental, not a big story. But there was two parts of the story that were actually very, very significant that I think a lot of people didn't fully appreciate. One is Microsoft broke its rule, and they're actually giving Cisco a most favored benefit. And so Cisco's got some exclusive benefits to this deal that where they've always kept their playing field very level, and that benefit specifically is that they get to run WebEx on their equipment at the same time.
Hmm.
Other systems like Zoom and Microsoft can run on the same equipment, but you have to reboot the equipment. You have to change everything. Microsoft allows Cisco just to seamlessly port over to WebEx. So that's basically they gave Cisco a seat at the table, literally, quite literally, the MTR table. They gave Cisco or WebEx a seat at the table. And then the other thing that's very important about the conversation change here is that this has always been a zero-sum game. You go Zoom or you go Teams or you go Ring Central or you go WebEx, one or the other. You pick one and that's your corporate standard. Both Microsoft and Cisco have changed that language to maybe you should have two. Maybe you should have Teams and WebEx.
Hmm.
And that's a fairly significant change in conversation. So there's been, Microsoft has broken out and gotten so powerful with Teams and is so dominant with Teams that there's been a conversation recently about who's going to be number two. The market's going to boil down to two players. And so who's going to be number two? Is it going to be Zoom? Is it going to be Cisco? Is it going to be Ring Central? Is it going to be Google? And there's actually pretty compelling arguments for all of those cases. But what is Microsoft's preference? And I think we heard that in this announcement. Microsoft's preference is we want it to be Cisco. And why would Microsoft choose Cisco? Well, they already share probably about 90% or higher the same customers. They already know how to work together. They already established boundaries and they have some overlaps, but they already are pretty healthy. Microsoft has no desire to see Zoom or Ring Central or Google in any of its accounts. And
Hmm.
so I can see Microsoft favoring Cisco, and I think that's what this announcement did. I think it's pretty significant, and that's to me the biggest story of 22.
Wow, that was quite a tour de force of stories. But there's one more. There's the biggest general tech story of the year, in your opinion. What was that?
I know you're on top of this one.
I'm excited about that one. Yes, this was Twitter. All things Twitter, the drama, the daily soap opera that was Elon Musk and Twitter, and things seem to be, I don't know, settling down a bit. There's less
Well,
drama,
I think he's
perhaps.
finally figured out that he has to keep his mouth shut. I think he bought Twitter because he liked the megaphone so much he wanted to own it, and like the Razor guy, right? I like this megaphone so much I went out and bought the company. But he's found out that the more he uses his megaphone, the more he's pissing off everybody. And now that it's affect Tesla, I mean, you saw Elon Musk is now the first person in world history to have personally lost $200 billion in just a matter of months, for that matter. It happened so quickly. His brand has his personal brand, his Tesla brand, the the Twitter brand have all been so damaged. Um, this was absolutely the worst acquisition of this. AT&T is like looking at this, going, "Wow, that's how you do a bad acquisition. We had no idea." This is such a bad acquisition, and it's such a bad fit because Elon Musk is so talented at engineering and
Yeah.
vision, and Twitter's problem isn't engineering. I mean, he's making it an engineering problem by how much capacity can I take away? How many employees can I take away? But Twitter's problem has always been more around social economic issues. It's been around free speech. It's been around really complicated issues that are not in the Elon Musk wheelhouse. So he's found himself in a very bad, precarious position. He's harming every brand, his personal brand. It's going to be a disaster. Now he'll come out. I wrote in here, he's going to win. He has unlimited budget space. Effectively, he'll get this right eventually. It might take him 9 lives.
I don't know. See,
But
I disagree. So for once, I think that not only will he find a new CEO, which he's promised to do at some point, but I think he'll sometime in 23 he'll just completely exit this business. Maybe the debt holders will take over, or he'll sell for some kind of loss. But he'll be out by maybe the end of 23, and this whole sad saga will be just a business case for future.
well,
But who knows?
it could certainly happen. The problem was Twitter was not financially was not financially well before he acquired it. Since he's acquired it, he's added debt to their books, so that they have a lot more pressure, and he's lost all the advertisers. I don't know what you sell. I don't know how you sell it, what you're going to be selling what. Now he's declared that all the code 100% of the code needs to be changed. So he wants to, so what exactly he bought is not exactly clear to me at all. And so it's a fiasco, but it's the story of the year because the amount of drama he's created, the amount of attention he's created, the amount of money that's on the line, it's just phenomenal. And you and I are very active Twitter users, especially me. You're trying to catch up, I know, but we're both very active on Twitter, and we want Twitter to be successful. It's important, anything we can do, anything I can do. I can't speak for you. Anything I can do to help Musk, if he wants to call me, I'm happy to share my ideas. But it would be a shame to see a world without Twitter, and I would hate to see this play out the way I think it might play out. But it's just, to me, the biggest general tech story of the year. It's just phenomenal watching this thing happen.
All right. Well, that was an amazing top 10 list, and
And we
we
didn't
are
even get to
off.
page 4. We only got the first 3 pages. It's
I know there's
eight-page
so
report.
much there. So how can folks subscribe and read? I think talking.
TalkingPoints.com. Thank you for
Okay,
asking, Evan. TalkingPoints.com.
with a Z.
And I'm changing the format in 23. It's always been a monthly format. Comes out once a month, the first week of every month. It's now going to come out sporadically. It's going to be much shorter. It's going to be much more frequent. Still behind the paywall, but you could subscribe to it
Wow,
at talkingpoints.com.
that's pretty cool. And I need a solution for, speaking of newsletters, for my little freebie newsletter I do, because Review, the company that Twitter acquired for its newsletter service that I have at the top of my profile, is being shut down. I
By
guess there are
Mr. Musk.
three servers, maybe 2 staff that required to keep this thing
Exactly.
going.
I mean, they
But
bought this, and Substack, which is the primary competitor to Review, is doing great. So there's
it's
revenue, there's opportunity, there's something you can build
it's
on. You want
unbelievable. The latest news is that Musk fired the janitors, so there's no one cleaning the toilets over at Twitter headquarters, and of course catering is gone. But okay, we could go on and
not
on.
only, and there's no sink. You took the sink.
Let that sink in. That's a sinking ship. There's so
Or maybe
many
he bought a sink.
analogies.
I don't know what he did. I don't know.
So much time. But we're going to be in a place in southern Florida, Fort Lauderdale, in just over a week at the Cloud Communications Alliance. Uh, Hit us up if you'll be there, or you're thinking about attending, or want to learn more. Just Google Cloud Communications Alliance, Fort Lauderdale. Great industry get together, small scale, so very intimate, couple hundred people. Lots of education, insights, analysis, and fun. Boat rides, sea views, beach views. I'm really looking forward to it. All
Me
right,
too.
everyone. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, viewers,
Thank you,
listeners,
Evan.
and have a great weekend.
All right.
Bye bye.